Greetings, Turok. I am Adon. The elders of the lost land known as the Lazarus Concordance have charged me with the task of guiding you on your quest to stop the Primogen.
Nostalgia is a dangerous thing. In essence, you're taking the memory of something, and every time you look back on it, you enjoy this memory more and more. It's getting constantly built up in your head to the point that it becomes something it never was in the first place. This kinda sums up my experience with Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. I was never able to finish this game as a kid because it always gave me motion sickness, but I still remember enjoying it all the same. Now, after the release of Turok Remastered, I thought I'd go back and see if this game was as good as I remembered it. After all, you always hear people saying how much better it is than Turok 1. Developed by Iguana Entertainment for the Nintendo 64 and ported to Microsoft Windows. It was released in late 1998 and critics had nothing but good things to say about it. Now look, I've got good things to say about it as well, but it hasn't aged very gracefully and suffers from some fundamental issues that I think really let the game down. Let's talk about them, shall we? So first off, Seeds of Evil starts off well enough. You're playing again as Turok. This time you're a dude called Joshua Fireseed. Does anyone else think that would make a good porn star name? Anyway, you're summoned by a big-breasted alien chick named Adon who tells you that an ancient alien race called the Primogen is planning to destroy 5 energy totems in 5 different dimensions. These different dimensions serve as missions where you explore the different environments, hunting down the keys to unlock the subsequent levels, as well as completing 2 side objectives. It's great that they haven't just made it another case of key hunting, and the objectives give each of these levels a bit more variety and also make them more challenging as well. Examples of this might be rescuing prisoners or small children, and you'll often have to do this 3 or 4 times per objective. Not only that, but you'll also need to find a Primogen key to access the final level, as well as a piece of a nuclear bomb, and most of these first need a particular talisman, which you won't even acquire until the later levels, kind of forcing you to go backtracking through older levels. Yeah, it's very confusing, almost sadistic at times, and you can't really mark a game down for being detailed, but it can be frustrating when you're running around looking for that one key, or last objective that you missed. The 4th level in the game is an underground series of tunnels that is just ludicrously long and has only 2 save points throughout. This is tedious enough on the PC, and I can't even imagine how frustrating it must have been for people playing on the 64. Visually, Turok 2 looks significantly better than the first game, especially with the character and weapon models. The textures in the environment show off a lot more detail, and the animation across the board is top notch. On the PC, the game doesn't quite hold up against other titles from the same era like Unreal, but it does get the job done. In terms of stability, I won't lie, the PC port has some serious frame rate issues, causing the game to feel quite jittery. The controls in general aren't quite as smooth as they were in the first game, and you get this kind of hobbling effect, which becomes most notable when you're trying to strafe around enemies. Thankfully, there's not that much platforming in this game, so you can't really fall prey to it all that much, but it is noticeable, and it's a shame to say that this isn't the best PC port. About the only thing that's got going for it is the ability to modify the FOV and save your game at any time, whereas on the 64, you're limited to viewing the game through cataracts and manual save points which are scattered throughout each level. Overall, they've made enough changes to the visuals, the gameplay and the story to ensure this does feel like a full-blown sequel, which it truly does. When people talk about Turok 2, they always rave on about how the game is one of the best examples of gun porn, and yeah, I guess that's a fair enough statement. There's some great weapons in this game that are creative and very destructive. In terms of weaponry, I think there's easily twice the amount of weapons from the first game. Turok 2 is also a very violent game. Enemies will spurt out large streams of blood when you shoot them, and the arrows from your bow will stay lodged in their bodies until they die. It also shows off a really cool dismemberment system, the likes of which we never really saw in PC gaming until the release of Soldier of Fortune a couple of years later. Weapons like pistols, shotguns, grenade launchers and rocket launchers are standard fare, but it's guns like the Cerebral Bore that are real standouts. The Cerebral Bore fires a small drone that latches onto an enemy's head and drills right into their brain. Good stuff. What's also neat about this gun is that it only works on intelligent species of enemies, and that's the kind of minute detail you don't always see in shooting games. So in terms of the design of the weapons, they are practically without fault, no arguments there. However, what most people fail to remember, or perhaps acknowledge, is that the game is downright stingy as all hell when it comes to giving the player ammunition. I just don't understand why they've done this, whether it's intentional or not, but you will be scraping by with ammo the vast majority of this game. There is just simply not enough of it put into the levels. Once per level you can return to Adon and she'll fill up your health and ammo, but it's a one-time deal and it will only momentarily ease the burden. You won't even get most of the good guns until the last couple stages of the game either, which will take you a good 4 or 5 hours minimum to even get to. I think what makes matters worse is when you're traveling back and forth between warp portals, as enemies will frequently respawn, but ammo and health pickups will not, meaning you're just never equipped enough to make good use of the available weaponry. It feels like I'm playing a survival horror game at times because it's like every single shot has to count, and it's just not fun. It's the complete antithesis of what it should be for a game that has a gun that literally sucks an enemy's brains out of their skull. Just give me some fucking ammo. What also doesn't help is that the ammo cap for all of the weapons is far too low. For pistols you can hold 50 bullets, for shotguns it's 20 shells, and for grenade launchers it's 10. 10 grenades! The plasma rifle can hold 150 rounds, but each round uses 5 cells, so in reality that's only 30 rounds as well. I guess it wouldn't be all that much of an issue if it wasn't for the lousy hit detection and the inconsistent damage enemies take. This is most notable with a weapon like the bow, where you will see arrows seemingly pass through enemies because you aimed 1 or 2 pixels in the wrong direction. And in regards to the inconsistent damage enemies take, you can finish an enemy off with 1 shotgun blast one time, and then another time it'll take 4 or 5, seemingly firing in the same location. And there's no discernible reason why this should happen. As a result of all of this, the shooting feels very lackluster. I mean, if this is gun porn, well, it's the equivalent of those 1am phone sex commercials where they cut out all the good stuff. The other thing you always hear people raving about is how intelligent the enemies in this game are, and again, yes, I guess that's true. They'll commonly run away when they're injured, they'll fire at you from behind cover, and they're very aggressive and mobile. There's some really cool scripted sequences when larger enemies will bust down a wall or a door and come flying towards you, and from level to level there's a lot of different types that you're up against. Smaller enemy types like spiders don't actually even have an attack animation, and simply being within a certain proximity to them means you'll start taking damage. I mean, how does that even make sense? Combined with the stunted movement controls, it's like you're being unfairly handicapped against enemies. Turok 2 isn't really a hard game. You've got up to a maximum of 9 lives, and I don't think I ever even came close to a game over, but it can't be denied that the shooting seems very sloppily thrown together. And I find it ludicrous that people compare it to games like Doom or Unreal and even hold it in the same high regard. I think the Nintendo 64 had a pretty good ratio for FPS games. Doom 64, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and the ports for Hexen and Quake were all pretty good. Turok, all things considered, is also a pretty damn good shooting game, but on the PC, it just doesn't stack up. And about all this game has going for it is the nostalgia. I mean, if you spent weekends playing this game in a darkly lit living room with your best friend at the time, then you'll probably still have fun with Turok 2 if you pick it up and play it again in 2016. And if that's the case, then more power to you, Sonny Jim. I mean, I'm the last person to tell someone to stop having fun with something. But if you look at Turok 2 as a game developed in 1998 and how it's held up over the years, well, I'm sorry to say, but it's a bit of a letdown. Bad controls, sloppy frame rate, and maze-like level designs do not a good game make. I like Adon's thigh gap as much as the next bloke, and yeah, Turok as a character is an absolute badass, but there's just so many other games from the same time that don't suffer from quite as many problems.
Your health is dangerously low.